Since we're already all here, let's go ahead and get started. We have just really honored here today to thank you everyone for coming in and being here. We really appreciate your time. My name is Erica Dinklesmith. I'm the Director of Labor Engagement for the White House. So thank you for joining us today for the conversation that we're going to have. And apologies for the preemptive conversation that we were just having on the President's Build Back Better plan and through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework and the American Families Plan. The American Families Plan is a once-in-a-generation investment in the foundations of middle-class prosperity, our education, healthcare, and childcare, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework, which is an historic initiative that will make life better for millions of Americans and create good-paying union jobs. Today, we are really honored to be joined by former Governor of Iowa and the current United States Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Tom Vilsack. Please go ahead, Secretary.
Erica, thanks very much, and thanks to everybody who's on the call. As Erica said, this is when they say once in a generation, really, I think it's once in a lifetime, and I've been around for a while. So I can tell you that we have not seen this level of commitment to rebuilding the economy and understanding the importance of the American family unit within that economy being rebuilt as with the Biden administration. Very, very pleased to be part of this call today. This administration, I think, if I could summarize what it's been focused on for the past 6 months, is solving problems for American families, solving problems that have plagued our country for quite some time. So when you think about families and you think about the problems they face, one of the questions that no doubt moms and dads across the country are asking, especially for youngsters who are now entering their senior year in high school, is what's next? How do we say no to our son or daughter who want to go and get a higher education when we may not be able to provide the resources? I had that conversation with my father when I found out that I had been admitted to law school. And my dad basically said to me, I don't know how we're going to find the money, but we will find it. Unfortunately and tragically, the next day he passed away. But it was student loans, veterans benefits, Social Security that I received by virtue of the fact that he died prematurely that enabled me to have the opportunity to go to law school, which opened up a whole new vista of opportunities for me. So I know what that conversation is like because I've had that conversation. And that's why the American Families Plan is so important, because it addresses fundamentally that question and it answers it this way. It says to those parents who are concerned about the high costs of higher education and the limited access potentially for minority students and young people, that we will try to create a program in which 2 years of a tuition-free community college is available to everyone. Those first 2 years of college, tuition-free. Or a certification program or a training program that allows you to go into a union apprenticeship or a union job, free. And if you're not interested in going to a community college, then there's an increase in the Pell Grant program to make it a little bit easier to go to that 4-year college program. Or maybe you combine the two and create a much less expensive college experience for young people. You don't shut them off from that experience. You make it easier for them to access. And by providing under the plan that the president has put forward additional support for minority serving institutions, for historic Black colleges, universities, for tribal colleges and Hispanic serving institutions, that also creates an opportunity for minority students to have a better shot at higher education. And it's not just on the higher end, it's also those young parents who are now having to decide, do we go back to work? How do we go back to work? Who takes care of our children? What are we going to do about preparing our youngster for school? Well, the American Families Plan solves that problem too by saying, how about 2 years of universal free pre-K for every student? High quality pre-K, where we actually pay the educators who are involved in pre-K a decent wage with decent benefits equal to the same benefits and the same pay levels that school teachers get. Why not? So important at the beginning of life. So this is a plan that addresses those challenges of high cost and the lack of availability of education. If it were just that, it would be a big deal. But it's more than that. It's for those parents who are concerned about the cost of childcare. It basically ensures that no family who is struggling is going to have to pay more than 7% of their income for childcare. It makes childcare affordable. And when you combine that with the tax credits, it's very easy for families to see their way towards returning to work and making sure that their youngsters have a quality childcare and a preschool educational opportunity under the American Families Plan. And this obviously will respond to the concerns that many are expressing about labor shortages, because we're solving a very specific issue that prevents many families from returning to work. And what if you have a sick child? I know something about that too. My granddaughter, when she was born, contracted RSV and basically was on life support for 20 days. That meant her mom and her dad were in that hospital bed with her, in that hospital room with her. Well, they were fortunate. They had jobs that allowed them to do that. But not everybody is fortunate to have those kinds of jobs. But everybody wants to be in that room with their child. Or maybe it's a sick parent who needs help, or maybe it's a sick spouse. Well, that's why paid medical and family leave is so important, to be able to allow you to do your moral responsibility of taking care of your family without having to worry about sacrificing your economic future. And speaking of future, why don't we make sure that every one of our youngsters during these summer months is well-fed as they are during the school year, by creating a permanent summer EBT program that provides resources to parents whose children are free and reduced lunch status, so that they can afford the food during the summer months that the kids get in schools during the school year, so that when they return to school, they are better prepared to learn. We know proper nutrition not only improves health outcomes, it also improves educational outcomes. And so the Families Plan calls for an expansion and a permanently establishing the summer EBT program, looks for ways in which we can also expand the universal free school effort in elementary schools, opening up new opportunities for 9 million children, young children, to have access. And obviously there are families today that continue to struggle with high healthcare costs. We don't want to put anybody in a position where they have to choose between paying their rent or paying the insurance bill, or paying for the prescription drugs, or paying for health insurance. That's why the Affordable Care Act was so important, and why it's important to continue to expand the opportunities for people to participate in the Affordable Care Act through the American Families Plan, which expands subsidies to assist and help families. And finally, there's the opportunity, obviously, for tax credits for families that are struggling to get a little extra cash because they've got a couple of kids and they get $3,000 per child, or maybe $3,600 per child if they're under 6, or they are able to take full advantage of the child care and dependent adult care tax credit. Or maybe they don't have children, but they could certainly benefit from the earned income tax credit increase that's contained in the American Families Plan. And all of this is paid for by people who have done quite well in the economy, people who can pay their fair share. And so it's a good balance between everybody stepping up to help the country and to build back better. And we build back better by rebuilding the infrastructure and rebuilding the fabric of the American family. So this is incredibly important work the administration is about, incredibly important work that we want Congress to be about. And I would encourage you to really pay attention to how this specifically impacts and affects Michigan and Wisconsin. I think you're going to hear from folks who know a lot more about this than I do in terms of the direct impact to your states. But there's no question that the passage of this plan together with the infrastructure plan will allow us to be much more competitive and much more better prepared as a country, and our children better prepared for a very competitive future that they face. So I appreciate the opportunity to put a few good words in for this American Families Plan and the scope and the extent of it. It's historic. It is indeed once in a generation, once in a lifetime opportunity. Let's take full advantage of it. Erica, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Vilsack. We are so honored to have you here today, and so honored to have your leadership on the American Families Cabinet Council here. Next, I'd like to hand it over to our Special Assistant to the President on Labor and Workforce, Pranita Gupta, and also our Special Assistant to the President, Daniel Hornong, on the National Economic Council. Thank you so much. Please take it away, Pranita and Daniel.
Thank you. Daniel, do you want to start?
Sure. And Pranita, I can talk about the bipartisan infrastructure framework and then hand it over to you to talk more about Build Back Better. So, the Secretary covered some of this, but, the president today in Illinois spoke about his two-track approach that he's planning to take over the coming weeks, really beginning with the bipartisan infrastructure framework that bipartisan members of the Senate agreed to over the course of the last several weeks. And then at the same time, moving forward with, what in DC is called budget reconciliation, but the president on the campaign called his Build Back Better agenda, which is really, as the secretary mentioned, the remaining pieces of his American Jobs Plan, in addition to his, American Families Plan agenda. Let me just talk a little bit about what's in the infrastructure framework before handing it over to Pranita. At a very high level, I think the president and the administration are very proud that he was able to bring Democrats and Republicans together on this deal. Obviously the details are still being worked out over the course of the next coming weeks. But we already know that, in addition to signaling to the world that American democracy can actually deliver for the American people again, this is something that president after president has tried to pass, a bipartisan infrastructure deal. We also think that this deal is really significant in that it will make tangible progress and improve people's lives, create jobs in communities across the country. So let me just walk through a couple of the items in the bill that we think are most significant. So to begin with, the bill is the largest federal investment in public transit in history. And it's also the largest federal investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak. So obviously this is something that's very important to President Biden. Also important because now the transportation sector is the largest single source of greenhouse gas emissions in our economy. So by taking significant steps to give people options to take public transit, to take passenger rail, we're also able to reduce emissions. We also know that from economic studies and from a whole host of other academic work that investing in public transit options makes it not just easier for people to get to work, but actually can increase labor force participation and ultimately wages by creating more customers for businesses to rely on. So beyond public transit, this infrastructure framework will make a significant investment in repairing and rebuilding our roads and bridges. Obviously, a central focus here on climate change mitigation and resilience, building our infrastructure to be more resilient than it was before. One of the things that the president has spoken to and that he's particularly proud of is that this bill is the largest investment in repairing and reconstructing our nation's bridges since the interstate highway system was first constructed. Obviously, talking about highways, not just enough to rebuild our roads and bridges. This framework also makes a significant investment in electric vehicle infrastructure along our highways and in rural and disadvantaged communities. The package will enable us to get to the president's goal of building 500,000 chargers across the country. Again, that's focused on rural areas, on our highways, on disadvantaged communities, with the goal really of giving people comfort that they will be able to drive across the country in their electric vehicles. They'll be able to find places to charge along the way. We think a very, very critical piece, not just of meeting our climate goals, but also positioning our economy so that we're able to compete with other countries that are making significant strides on electric vehicle charging and electric vehicle manufacturing. Another piece of this framework that has gotten some significant attention is that it makes the investments necessary to eliminate the nation's lead service lines and pipes, enabling us to really deliver clean drinking water to up to 6 to 10 million American homes who are currently getting their drinking water through lead service lines. An additional 400,000 schools and childcare centers where that's the case. This is obviously something that has a disproportionate impact on some of our cities throughout the Midwest. So for example, Milwaukee has 70,000 lead service lines. We know right now Detroit has 80,000. outside of Michigan and Wisconsin, but still relevant, the Twin Cities and Minnesota have 90,000, St. Louis at 30,000. So this is really an investment that we think is critical to make. We know the health impacts that lead has on children in particular, and this is a priority that the president fought incredibly hard for, and we're really proud to be delivering on. And then finally, I could go on, but a final piece to highlight is that this framework will connect every American to reliable high-speed internet, and will make a significant investment in driving down prices for internet service and closing the digital divide. We know that there's a significant divide between rural communities and urban communities, also between African American and Latino and Native families on the one hand, and white families on the other hand. So by making internet not just available, but also affordable, and addressing some of the competitive problems in the broadband space, we're going to be able to deliver on the president's commitment to make high-speed internet, reliable high-speed internet, available to every single American. So again, I could keep going, but the bottom line here is that we think that this is a significant step forward in addressing some of our most critical infrastructure needs. It's obviously just one part of the president's agenda. That's why he spoke today in Chicago, or outside of Chicago, to the importance of passing the remainder of his agenda, what we're calling the Build Back Better agenda. But we also are quite proud of this first piece and think it will make significant progress in communities throughout the country. So with that, I will turn it over to Pranita.
Thanks so much, Daniel. And, I'm just going to build on what Daniel said and also what Secretary Vilsack said. So again, my name is Pranita Gupta. I'm the Special Assistant to the President for Labor and Workers on the Domestic Policy Council. And just building on what Daniel said, the Build Back Better plan invests in our children and our families. It's helping families cover the basic expenses that so many people are struggling with right now, including lowering health insurance premiums, cutting child poverty in half, investing in safe and affordable housing, and producing a larger, more productive and healthier workforce in the years ahead. So it's really in order to grow the middle class and expand the benefits and economic growth to all Americans, and to leave the United States far more competitive. So what the plan includes, and this is building again on what Secretary Vilsack already spoke to, the plan will add at least 4 years of free education. So these are transformational investments from early childhood to higher education, so that all children and young people are able to grow, learn, and gain the skills they need to succeed. So this includes providing universal high quality preschool to all 3- and 4-year-olds, is providing 2 years of free community college, and providing funding to address infrastructure needs at the community colleges, is providing up to approximately $1,500 in additional assistance to low-income students by expanding the maximum Pell Grant. The plan also allows Dreamers to access Pell Grants. It's providing historic investments in historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, and minority-serving institutions to provide 2 years of subsidized tuition for low and middle-income students. It's also about modernizing our schools, which includes upgrading and building new public schools, ensuring that low-income students have equal access to healthy and stimulating places to learn with improved air quality and ventilation. It's investing in our teachers as well as our students by improving teacher training and supports that our schools become engines of growth at every level. It includes some critical direct supports to children and families. And again, these are some of the points that the Secretary spoke to as well. This includes investing in affordable childcare by providing direct support to families to enable low and middle income families to pay no more than 7% of their income on high quality childcare. It's investing in the care workforce, funding childcare providers and the workers themselves, ensuring a $15 minimum wage for early childhood staff, along with improved training. It's investing in long-term care workforce and expanding home and community-based services for hundreds and thousands of seniors and people with disabilities, and ensuring that these caregiving jobs are well-paying and include the ability to collectively bargain. It's providing direct supports to families and workers in the form of a national comprehensive paid family medical leave program so that workers aren't forced to choose between a much needed paycheck and caring for a new child, a seriously ill loved one, or healing from a serious illness. It's providing critical nutrition assistance to families by expanding access to healthy meals to our nation's students. And in addition to what the Secretary already spoke to about expanding summer EBT to all eligible children nationwide and expanding free school meals, it will also facilitate reentry for formerly incarcerated individuals by allowing SNAP eligibility, and will launch a $1 billion healthy foods incentive demonstration and invest $500 million in school kitchen equipment grants. It will also construct and modernize more than 2 million affordable and sustainable places to live. So these investments will allow greater levels of affordability in more and higher opportunity places across the country, as well as create good middle-class jobs for community members. That includes providing federal subsidies for low-income housing tax credits, it will allow for the building and rehabilitation of more than 500,000 homes for low and middle income home buyers and homeowners. It will address longstanding public housing capital needs in urban and rural communities. It will remove lead-based paint from homes and invest $2 billion to build and rehabilitate housing across rural America. It will also catalyze and support community-led efforts to spur inclusive recovery in urban and suburban, rural, and tribal places, including revitalizing the physical assets that build community connectedness through community-led revitalization projects. Partnering with rural regions, including tribal nations, to build on their unique assets and spur inclusive growth by investing $5 billion in a new rural partnership program. And in addition to that, it'll modernize veteran affairs hospitals and clinics and invest in improving sustainability and resilience of federal buildings. It will also invest in training programs that prepare millions of American workers for high quality jobs in fast growing sectors. These sectors include clean energy, manufacturing, caregiving, and helping workers find these jobs and have the training necessary to fill these positions and move into middle income jobs with unions. It'll provide comprehensive services, childcare, transportation, income supports for workers who have lost their jobs due to no fault of their own, to be able to complete their training and to move into these in-demand positions. It will create 1 to 2 million new registered apprenticeship slots and invest in pre-apprenticeship to create pathways for underserved communities to be part of these proven earn and learn programs. And it will invest in middle and high school career pathway programs and provide for job training for formerly incarcerated individuals and community violence intervention programs. And as the Secretary mentioned, it'll extend tax cuts for families and children and American workers, including extending the Affordable Care Tax credits to lower health insurance premiums, extend the CTC increases in the ARP through 2025 and make the CTC, the child tax credit, permanently fully refundable. So the child tax credit will expand from $2,000 per child to $3,000 per child for 6-year-olds and above, and $3,600 per child for children under the age of 6. And it'll also make 17-year-olds eligible for the first time and make the credit fully refundable. It will also permanently increase tax credits to support families with childcare needs. The president is calling on Congress to make permanent the temporary child independent tax credit expansion enacted in the American Rescue Plan. It will make the earned income tax credit expansion for childless workers permanent. And in addition to that, it will revitalize manufacturing, secure US supply chains, and invest in research and development. And lastly, it will put a new generation of conservation and resilience workers to work and provide tax cuts for businesses and consumers tackling the climate crisis in communities across the country by creating a new civilian climate corps to work conserving public lands and waters and advancing environmental justice while maximizing accessible training opportunities and pathways for good union jobs. It will invest in clean energy and energy efficiency block grants, and it will provide $300 billion in tax cuts for businesses and consumers to create good paying manufacturing jobs and deploy clean energy technologies. So that's a lot, as you can tell, in this package, but that's why we're so excited and revved up to move this package forward, because we want to ensure, again, that we're really growing the middle class and expanding benefits and economic opportunities for all Americans. I'll hand it back to Erica.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Pranita. We've had a couple people send in questions ahead of time here. The first question that we have is, what kind of funding will the American Families Plan provide for informal caregivers? Example, paid leave from work, better access for professional services, etc.
Sure. I think one of the most important supports that's going to be available for informal caregivers is having access to 12 weeks, up to 12 weeks of paid family medical leave. I think that's such a critical need. So many families have to make terrible choices between caring for a loved one and a paycheck or their job. And this will actually allow those workers to be able to have access to paid family, 12 weeks of paid family medical leave, and also get much needed income during that time. At this time, the program will ensure that workers get 66.7% of their average weekly wages replaced, and that workers, the lowest wage workers, would get 80% of their average weekly wages replaced. And it would cover all forms of paid leave. So it would cover care for a newborn or newly adopted or foster child. It would allow people to take time off to care for a seriously ill family member. And we're including chosen family as the definition of family. It will allow people to seek treatment or care for workers for their own serious medical condition. And it'll also ensure that people can take time off for a loved one's military deployment or serious injury. And it'll also ensure that those who are survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking have safe time to get the services they need. In addition to that, it will give 3 days of bereavement leave starting in year 1 to anyone who has a loss of a loved one. So that is a really important program that'll ensure greater economic security for informal caregivers.
Thank you so much, Pranita. We had another question. We had 3 questions come in total prior to the event today, and 2 more that actually just came in via email. The second question here: in what way will the President's infrastructure plan interact with the congressionally introduced Public Health Infrastructure Saves Lives bill?
Sure, I can take that as well. So for too long, our nation's public health infrastructure has been underfunded, and we rely on it so much in times of crisis, as we've seen during COVID-19. So undoubtedly, we're continually thinking of how we can ensure that we're building back better public health infrastructure as we turn the corner on COVID-19 and prepare for future crises, and continue to focus on improving health equity in bills such as the Public Health Infrastructure Saves Lives Act just does that. Similarly, the President has championed something similar to that in the American Rescue Plan, which provided $7.6 billion to establish, expand, and sustain the public health workforce, including making awards to state, local, and territorial public health departments to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. This includes $3 billion that the CDC will use to create a new grant program that will facilitate federal investments in the people and expertise needed at the state and local levels to expand, train, and modernize the public health workforce for the future. And in the months ahead, CDC will work with leaders from across the public health community to design this new grant program. And the money that the American Rescue Plan is investing in public health is meant to favor quality over quantity, meaning we're focused on ensuring a sustainable public health workforce that's funded not just for 1 year, but for years to come.
That was a great question. Thank you, Pranita. The next question, the third question, come in prior to the call today, was building a new electric cable, example for solar, would typically be done at least in part on private land. What provisions does this eventually provide for in the president's plan?
I can take that. So we are at the point right now where the bipartisan group of senators on this infrastructure bill have come to kind of a framework agreement. There isn't legislative text yet, so a lot of the details are to be worked out. What we've agreed to is funding levels and some of the specific uses. And so over the course of the next few weeks, we think that kind of details like that will really be nailed down. I will say just broadly that the bill makes significant investments in our electric grid and our power transmission, and would actually create a grid authority at the Department of Energy to deal with some of these very issues, addressing complex challenges that arise across state lines. No answer for you yet because we don't have one yet, but we'll be working on that in the days and weeks ahead.
Thank you, Danielle. And we had 2 additional questions come in the course of this call. One was, how will schools and students such as MSU or the University of Michigan benefit from the educational benefits?
Sure. So I think, universities and colleges will have the ability to support support students through the Pell Grant, which will ensure more students have access to educational opportunities. By providing 2 years of free community college, we will ensure that more people have access to higher education, and we'll be able to utilize these great state and community resources to be able to get that education and to be able to move into jobs with middle class incomes, more unionized jobs. There's also ensuring that we're actually providing historic investments also, as I mentioned, to historically Black colleges and universities and other minority serving institutions that will really help subsidize tuition for low income and middle income students. So if there are those sorts of institutions, they can really help ensure more students get enrolled. And part of that is also going to be to expand health graduate educational programs in many of these institutions. And I think one of the most important elements is investing in the completion and retention activities at colleges and universities that serve high numbers of low-income students, because we know that's a huge issue that students often cannot afford to finish their schooling, and to actually ensure people can have the services and the funding and the retention activities so that they can actually finish their schooling so that they can move into good jobs.
Thank you, Pranita. And the last question here tonight has to do with pipes and waterways, and how will the bipartisan infrastructure plan and AFP help places like Flint, Michigan, still suffering from the water crisis?
So it's a great question. The infrastructure framework, what we have right now is an agreement to invest $55 billion in addressing water infrastructure challenges across the country. So some of that will go through EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency's state revolving grant programs to get state and local governments the funds that they need to do things like lead pipe and service line replacement. Also dealing with challenges like PFAS pollutants. And then also additional funding to make sure that state and local governments have the funding they need to be investing in wastewater infrastructure. So there's a whole host of water infrastructure investments in here, but at the very top of the list is the president's commitment to have the funding needed to replace lead service lines and pipes across the country. And what he's committed to and what this plan would do is over the kind of 8 to 10 year window that the funding in this framework is envisioned over, is we would be able to accomplish that goal of really making sure that whether it's homes, schools, childcare centers, we're able to eliminate lead service lines and pipes. So, obviously more details to come over the course of the next couple of days and weeks as we finalize this bill. But that's the goal, and we believe we've secured the funding to do it.
Thank you, Danielle. Appreciate it. And those are all the questions that we've received so far. We wanted to just give a big thank you to everybody who's here tonight. And our ask from the White House here is simple, in that you help us lift up the message and the priorities and the agenda for the president and what we're trying to do to help America's working families to get these initiatives across the finish line. We're looking for any social media, any op-eds, any blog posts that you put out there for your members, for your people, for the people in your community. We're trying to educate as many people as possible and also develop a closer relationship with many of the people who these initiatives will impact in state and the White House. So we greatly appreciate your patience with our technical flubs this evening, and deeply apologize for that. And then we appreciate you getting on tonight, communicating with the White House and helping us get these initiatives across the line. If you do put out any social media, any op-eds, blog posts, or any external communication about the information here tonight, please flag it for us. We'd love to see it. We'd love to lift it up from the White House, and we'd love to show how these really bold and historic initiatives are helping families in Wisconsin and Michigan. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.